Learn everything that you need to know to make creative kinetic typography in After Effects like this. Now, kinetic typography simply means moving text, and it's a staple of the motion designer's toolbox. From the earliest movie titles by Saul Bass to TV ads, lyric videos, and beyond, moving text is everywhere, and you can set yourself apart by learning a few techniques and getting creative. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at this short kinetic typography animation, which is broken down into about 7 different techniques. We set out to create an almost Pixar-style opening with playful animated shapes, interesting text, and time to a jazzy music track. Now, as this tutorial is focused on moving text, we're only going to be looking at the kinetic typography effects used in this one, and we won't really be focusing too much on the animation of the shapes. But if you are keen to know how we made this animated gradient snake, then get subscribed to the channel and stay tuned, because I've got a breakout mini tut coming very soon, or maybe it's up right now, depending on when you're watching this. I digress. Let's jump into this first scene and start making some text move. Now, if you're interested, I'll link this entire After Effects file down below in the video description so you can download it and play along with me, and I'll get to a little bit more on that later. All right, we're in After Effects now. Let's just play through this composition just to sort of see how it's all put together, and you'll start to get a feeling for where everything lies and where all of the different scenes come in. So where does one begin? There's a few scenes there, these kind of ball motifs at the beginning. Clearly. So that's the message of this animation. And like I mentioned, we've got this kind of gradient snake moving through, and we will be teaching that in a little standalone tutorial because it's quite interesting the way I ended up putting that together. Not natively something that you can do in After Effects, but I found a workaround. And then of course you've just got these different shapes that move through to kind of join all of the text up. But importantly, we're here to look at the text. So let's jump into our first comp here, which is where. So where, let's just play this through. It's very, very simple animation here. It's just moving back and forward. So it's the text layer. We're moving back and forward. And I'll just turn off the snakes here so you can see exactly what's happening. And I'm going to, for the time being, turn off our CC spotlight, which is the first thing. It's really just a left to right animation here with some easing, and it's bouncing back and forward between those two things. Now, of course, you can just do easy ease, but you won't get, exactly the same range of motion. I'll show you what this looks like if it's just easy ease keyframes. And there we go, F9. Just moving back and forward. There's a bit of easing in and out, but it's not as dynamic as what I ended up creating. So I'm just going to undo that. And you can see here, this is the difference. This kind of fast in, fast out, fast in, fast out. And it really feels like the word is sort of avoiding the spotlight once we turn that on. So I'll show you in the graph editor what that looks like there. It's this kind of much more wavy, very fast in, very fast out, very fast in, very fast out, but then kind of slower at the peaks. And again, just to show you what it looks like in the graph editor, if you've got this just being easy ease, let's select all of these. If I can grab all of them, and we'll make them easy ease. That's what easy ease looks like on a curve. Easing in, easing out. What we had was fast in, fast out, fast in, fast out, but with this nice sort of slope in between. So that's the graph editor for the where. And then because I wanted to have the word where, which is, a searching word, where is something, I wanted to have that kind of like darting between this spotlight. And by the way, this is CC spotlight here, which is what we've dragged onto this one here. We'll turn that on, and you can see here, it's just basically created this light, this point light source that you can program to move around. And so I just wanted the word to kind of go in and out of shadow, but still getting a little bit of it on the sides here. So if you just had it done with masks and feathering and things like that, I mean, you could probably achieve it that way, but obviously it's better to just do it with CC Spotlight. If you've got the access to the tool there, why not use it? But what it means is that you can kind of control the fall off. And what I mean by that is this kind of like gradient into the shadow that we get. So you still do see the word there once it's in shadow, because obviously it's not going to go full darkness. I say obviously, like this is a real thing. But if you were to shine a spotlight on something like that, it would fall off gradually to darkness. So up in the effects controls panel here, you can see exactly what I've done. If I click this and make sure I've got CC Spotlight selected here, you can see over time, these points are moving. So if I just drag them around, you can see that this is like the from point source, and this is the to point source. So it's going from here to here. It's basically where the spotlight is shining from. And I'll just undo what I've just done then. And you can see if you move those around, you move where the point source is coming from. and where it's aiming towards, your options are basically endless in terms of where you want these lights to be hitting. So really, really a simple effect to start off with. And then of course we've got our snake stroke here, which is underneath behind the text. And you can see that just playing through there. But as I was making this, I thought it would be fun to just add even just a tiny little bit of depth to this first one, even though this is a very basic way to start, just with basically some movement in and out and a point source light. So to add a little bit of depth, all I've done here is I've duplicated this snake stroke and put it in front of the text and then just masked it off here. If I open up my masks, you can see here, I've just masked it off. And if I shut the bottom layer off, you can see that more visually. Just masked it off so it looks like the wear is hiding behind that front thing. So therefore it kind of looks like, this part of the red is behind the text and this part is in front of the text. Very, very simple effects here to add a little bit of depth to your animation. So starting off simple, let's move to something a little bit more complex.
This video is brought to you by Envato, the unlimited creative subscription. The broadest range of categories, everything that you need to make great videos. Follow the link in the description and start creating now.
So this is our second scene here, so does, and I really wanted to look at how we could do some big stretchy text here. So again, I'm gonna hide the colored lines here so we can just focus on the text. And what's happening here? Well, basically we're converting the text, which is just a text layer, we're converting that to shapes. So we're making it a shape layer from the text. I'll show you how to do that. And then we're just grabbing points and dragging them out over time. And I'll show you exactly what the process is. I'll just create a new comp so we can see that in action. So I'll create a new comp here. We'll just call this text outlines. And it does not need to be 6 minutes and 43 seconds long. So let's just make that, 10 seconds long. And let's right click and go new text, or you can do this up here with your text tool or T on your keyboard. And let's make it the font that we've been using. Let's just pick a different word that's not does, because we've seen what that looks like in action. So I don't know, hey. So you right click down here on the text layer and you can go to create and then go create shapes from text. And so that now will hide your text layer, but basically create shapes from your text. And if I drop down here, go to your contents, and then for that, you've got contents for each letter. And you can just keep twirling down until you finally find the path for each of these. Now that I've got the path, what I can do is highlight some and move them around. You can highlight all of them if you want, or you can highlight some of them. And then you just get creative on how you want these things to move. So let's say, for instance, I want this to move side to side, like here. We will go to our text outlines and let's just bring it up. We'll start the whole thing over here. Go to our path here, we'll hit a keyframe and we'll do that for each of our paths for our letters. And you'll see, for instance, with the E, there's an outside path and then an inside path. So anything like that, an O or an A or anything that's got sort of an inside path will have two of these paths down here. And the reason why I'm doing that, adding keyframes at the start, is then you can just hit U on your keyboard and just bring up just the keyframes for that, so you don't have to have all of those menus twirled open. So let's move forward to say 1 second and let's drag all of these except these last two path handles here. And we'll just drag these and I'm gonna hold shift so they're coming out on the same plane. Move them over here and then maybe at 1.5 seconds or so, I will grab this path because this was our H. I don't want to select any of the E or the Y. There we go. So it should just be these two now. Let me work that out. Yes, it is those two. I can hold shift and move this back down. You do kind of have to eyeball this a little bit, make sure it's the right width in terms of your original font. And you can just check that by turning your original font back on and then kind of like laying it over if you need to double check that for any reason. So now we've got these keyframes. We'll just play it. They're just linear keyframes, very boring, but that's how you get that moving across. And then, if you just converted those to easy ease or something, got a little bit more movement, but I think it would be better to kind of snap those really quickly. So let's highlight all of those, go into our graph editor, and I'll just keep it in the speed graph for this time being. Highlight these bottom keyframes, and let's just really make the ins really fast. And let's just see what that looks like. Let's make this out one fast as well. Let's just drag these like this and then see if we can get this one to go in quickly. Yeah, I mean, again, you can play with it to your heart's content. Let's just speed this up a little bit. Yeah, that's cool. Doop. And let's have a look back at our does comp here. And the reason why I've done it on the D and the E, as you can see, is because, let's just say, for instance, I wanted to do it on the S. What would that look like? Well, let's move it down here so we can see. Let's go drop down our contents, go down to our S, find our path for our S, and let's say just at the end here we wanted to extend these ones out. Let's grab maybe these 8 path markers and stretch them out. And it does not look as good as it does when you have a big straight line. So your mileage may vary depending on what font that you're working with and what letters you're working with. You do kind of have to strategically work out what's going to work. So obviously I've got a hard line here on the D and a hard line here on the E. So that's why this animation looks good. If you did it with the S and the O, it's not going to look as good. So that's text outlines. Now let's move on to this one. So obviously we've got this little ball motif coming up in here, and that's to keep the story moving like we've talked about. And this one just kind of molds straight into our text. And the reason why I ended up doing this ball popping up here for this one is because, well, I actually did it after the fact. I animated the inner path for the O first, and then I was like, oh, cool, this is going to be a really good way to have like a little ball drop up and then it extend to be the path of that O. So I'm going to turn off the snake layer again, and I'm going to turn off the ball so we can see what we're doing. It's really pretty simple. It's just the inner path of the O animating up. We'll actually turn off the N and the E for now as well, just so we're focusing on the O. So the inner part of the O is just going like that. It's super simple, super simple. And then obviously with our snake that comes through, it's going over. So it kind of like hugs that as it comes around this corner. But the text animation in itself is really, really simple. So to do that, it's the exact same thing we did last time in our text outlines, where we right click and we go create shapes from text. So if I twirl down the one outlines here, you can see I've got O, N, and E. I've also got a mask here. So this is just masking the one, this is just masking the O here. So like if I subtracted that, it would just be the N and the E. So that was just the simplest way to do that. So I'll add that back to add. And then on the O, we've got the inside path and the outside path. And I'm just animating the inside path here to go from this ball shape to its original size. And then I've got the stroke turned off for that as well. Then we'll turn our other little bits on here so we can see the ball comes up, lands exactly where the inner part of the O is going to start animating. So that's where this is where the white ball ends and the O begins. And then that O animates open as this snake path is coming around. Then our N here, which is a new N, our other ones are masked in our one layer. That is just track matted to the red snake here. So it's track matted so that it looks like the snake is making that appear on. And for those who aren't 100% sure of what a track mat does, it basically just carves out a piece of one layer to expose another part of a different layer. It's a way to kind of intersect transparency on two different layers, in a nutshell. And then to make the E kind of have the same kind of motion, I've just got a very simple mask happening on the E here. So if I click that, I've just got a very simple mask and with the E animating down. And the way you do this position animation with the mask is really simple. I do it all the time. I'll just create a new composition to show you that. So new comp, again, we'll just make another one here, mask N, and let's go here, N. And what we want to do is once our text is in there and written, we'll click on our text layer and we'll hit Command-Shift-N to make a new mask. And then we'll drop this down and go to Animate and do a position animation. And then down here under your range selector, you've got a position. And then you can move that piece of text around your composition, but have the mask stay static. Now, if you're to do it the other way and do this with the normal position movement, if I just hit P on my keyboard with this, it's going to move the mask with it. So that's a way to do it so that the mask stays static and the text can animate in and out no matter where you want in your frame, but have a mask that it will be hidden behind. So let's have a look at that again. Now that you know the technique, what's happening here is it's just masking down behind this mask. And it's a really, really, really quick part of the animation. Obviously, the focus here is on the ball that becomes the O and then the snake coming around. So the E is almost an afterthought, especially after the N kind of track mats on. So that is that technique. All right, we're flying through here, people. We're flying through. Number 4, the beginning. This is really simple. You can see here, I've got text layers that just go on at a certain time. B, E, G, I, N. And the reason why I have done those on different layers instead of one word using, say, the typewriter effect or the source text keyframes is because I want them to kind of move independently of each other on this path. And the way I did that was I created a mask in a different layer. I'll show you this in a second. I created a mask in a different layer, and then I copied that mask to each of our text layers, and then you can define within that text stack that you want it to follow this mask path. So let's see that in action. I'll just right click, create a new composition again, and we'll call this text on path. Let's go new text. We'll just call this path. And then down here, we're going to right click and go new null object just for the sake of it, and go to our pen tool here and create our path. And we're just going to go like, I don't know, something like that. Then on our null, we can see that we've got our mask here. Let's copy that mask and go paste on our path here. Now you can see our text layer has this mask on it. We can now delete the null. We don't need that. In our text layer, we drop down text and we go to path options and we select mask 1. And now you can see that our text is on our path. Let me zoom in so that you're not looking at that so far away. So our text is on our path here, and you can just move it along and have it animate that way. You can animate via the first and last margin, and you can force an alignment as well. So you can have the last word static against the end of the path and then have it all animate towards each other to converge. Let's turn that off. And you can also make it perpendicular to the path. So if we move that along, you can see as we start to go uphill, it will kind of climb like you're on a staircase. And if we wanted to, we could just double click on this because it's still a text layer and change the tracking on this, for instance, to have that kind of move along and then track up as such. You can also reverse the path as well. So like if you wanted to have the letters go backwards for any reason, again, you can get completely creative with this. And we will see this later on when we move to our in the beginning one, which is the circle comp. So again, now that you know how that is done, we've basically just got these all animating along the path at different times, and we want those to be at different speeds so that it looks like the pipe is sort of sucking up each of these letters one by one. And if you did this at the exact same speed, all of these letters would happen at the same time. As you can see here, the B and the E kind of get squished together, and I don't mind that. It's very fast at the end of this little animation. So long as I've got the N, the I, and the G kind of happening, all at once, I was pretty happy with that. But let's say, for instance, we wanted that E to happen at a different time. Let's just go find our E comp here, and we can just move the keyframe along a little bit. So maybe around about here, have it start a little bit earlier. There we go. And that way they're not kind of like bumping into each other. So again, it's all creativity. You can do whatever you want, but that is how you do it technically along the path, animating text along a path. And then are you ready for the next one? Number 5. It's going to be the craziest one that you're going to learn in this entire tutorial. I'm just kidding. It's just it's static. Sometimes you need some static things. You need breathing room. But I'll show you what that looks like in the main comp here. So number 5 is kind of in conjunction with number 4. You can see it's sitting over the top. So number 5 is on an alpha layer. If I go here and turn alpha on, you can see it's just this question mark. And now the reason why I have done it this way is because if I show you this mask off here, I'll show you what the mask looks like subtracted. The bottom of the question mark is a square on this font, and I wanted it to be a circle so that it would continue with this ball motif. So I've just done a simple mask there. And then in our main comp here, you can see that what we were just working on has the ball at the end of this, dropping out of the bottom of the pipe, dropping out of the top of the pipe, bouncing along. And then that resting point there, again, sorry, I'm zoomed out. That resting point there is exactly underneath where this question mark sits in the main comp. So that's how you kind of like composite all of that together. There's 100 different ways to do what I've just done there, but as I was building this, that seemed like the quickest and easiest way. Sometimes the quickest and the easiest way is the right way. All right, so moving on. This one's super simple as well, but actually looks really fun. Let me center this back up so you can see, and I'll turn a few things off. Let's turn that layer off first so we can see what we're looking at. It's just big text basically, and then you've got this back layer here, or it's actually our top layer, but I'll show you how that works in a second. You've got this, which has 2 different effects on it, CC RepeTile and CC Flow Motion. So it's really just the one word, at, and if I go and show you this, it is one text layer with one instance of the word on it. And I've just got it up in the top left. You then add CC RepeTile on it, and you can expand however many times you want to left and right. And I've just done it between these safe margins here. And then you've got your expand up and down. And I've just done it again between these safe margins here. And then I've got CC Flow Motion turned on, and CC Flow Motion is quite fun, really. I'll show you how it works. So you've got two different knots, and then you've got the amount that these knots kind of play with the image. So I'll just make the amount 0 for both of these, just so we can see what's happening. Actually, I'll make it like 10 or something. And then I'll move the knots around. And you can see here, it's just warping in different parts of the image. And if I zoom out, you can see the knots are here. There you go. That's actually way better representation of what it looks like. So move those in, and then you can see as you animate those around, you just are kind of warping this text layer. And the bigger you warp, the kind of crazier you get. So you can go into negatives, you can go into positives, you can kind of move them anywhere around the screen, and then just kind of make something that looks cool and then works with the animation that you're going with. So I'll just undo those changes that we've made there and go back to my original. So the original wasn't warped all that much. I've got the knots outside of the composition, so you're not actually seeing them all come together. And that way you just get this kind of warpy movement. And you can see as I move along, I'm not actually moving the knots. I'm just warping the amount that these knots are affecting this text layer. And then to get this kind of border around the main text layer here, I've created outlines from the text. So again, we've done that a bunch of times, but you create our shapes from text. And let's turn all of this off so you can see what those are. Again, it's just a bigger version of the text, but this time it's shapes, as you can see. And then on our main layer here, which sits above everything, I've got that track matting. So I'll turn that off so you can see, but I've got that set to a track mat to those outlines. So basically it means it's kind of masking the outlines from that part of the image. And then when I turn our bottom layer back on again, because that was sort of internal to those outlines, then you kind of see that text coming through. So really it's just creating an at-shaped hole within this. And then we can put our text layer in at the bottom again. So again, another, set of relatively simple things, but with some of these like CC effects that are here in After Effects, you can get really interesting looking visuals very quickly. And let's say you spent 8 hours today playing just with CC flow motion on a bunch of different text or shape layers or 3D elements or something like that. You're going to get something very, very interesting. So again, just play and experiment. You don't know how these tools work until you've experimented with them. You're never just going to be able to drop them on and they're going to look perfect the first time. So you really got to spend some time understanding how they work. Not even technically how they work, just understanding how they manipulate different parts of your image. All right, moving on to this one. This is in the beginning. And this one is pretty simple, and it's kind of an amalgam of all the things that we've already done so far. You can see here it's just a bunch of different text layers, and I've got them circling around a path. We've already done text on a path, and I'll show you again how to do that for this circle. And then I've just got those sort of spinning in opposite rotations set to different scales. It looks like these are actually 3D layers. They're not. They're not set in a Z distance or anything like that. They are set in just different scales. And then adding some different levels of a Gaussian blur to each layer to give it some depth makes it feel like a 3D comp. So we'll go back to our text on path here and we'll just delete this. And because this is going to go around a circle, it's going to repeat itself a couple of times. So we'll do it with the beginning. And I'm just going to make that like maybe 150. I'm going to make a space after here. I'm going to copy it. Oops. I'm going to copy it and then I'm going to paste it with the space. Let's just paste it a few times here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here, go new. Let's just do a null object. I'm going to go up here to click our rectangle tool and I'm going to hold long click on that and do an ellipse tool. And then making sure I've got the null selected. I'm just going to drag out a circle and I'm going to hold shift to create a perfect circle. Now I'm going to copy that mask, copy, and then paste it to our text mask again, delete the null, and then I'm going to drop this down, text, path options, mask 1. And let's just move that into the center so we can see a little bit better. There we go. So that's on our path there, but obviously it looks a little bit crazy. So if I double click in this, I'm just going to hit right on my keyboard, right arrow on my keyboard to get to the end of the comp. And I'm just going to start hitting backspace until these stop overlapping. There we go. And because I can't do another full one, I don't think, yeah, without it overlapping, I'm going to make that the end there. Then I'm going to highlight, Command A, and just increase my font size until I'm happy with that. So that looks like pretty good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I can twirl this down, go to our text, go to our path options, and then we can change our settings here. So I'm going to do reverse path, so it sits on the outside of the path, not the inside. And then I'm just going to, on my text layer here, hit S on my keyboard and just scale that down. I'm also going to set the anchor point to the center of this composition because we'll be spinning things around and you want to make sure that it's spinning from the center. So right click on the layer, go to transform and then center anchor point in layer content. So now if I rotate, it's going to be rotating around itself properly. And if I didn't do that and then tried to rotate, it's going to be sort of off center and all wacky. I mean, again, if that's the creative way that you're going to do it, you can do it, but make sure that you've centered your anchor point if you're doing any rotations like this and you want it to rotate smoothly around that center axis. So that's how you get the text going around the path. And then simply all I've done is I've gone through here and I've copied and pasted them a bunch of times, and you can see the scale here. The furthest one away is 11% and the closest one is 192%, and that closest one is off the screen basically. My rotation properties on those, some are rotating in the positive direction and some are rotating in the negative direction. So let's play that through and you can see that I've just got this spinning. These are linear as well. I don't have any curves adjustments. I don't have anything like that. No easy ease, no fancy curve adjustments in my graph editor. These are just linear because you just want them to just be, I kind of wanted this kind of idea of almost like a 2001 Space Odyssey with the rotating ship. It's just rotating at a constant through time. And I think if I had them all rotating one way, you'd get a little bit dizzy looking at it, but this one at least feels like you're moving through. And then what I've done is I've parented them all, so you can just select all the ones you want to parent, select one of the pick whips, and then put it up to wherever you want. And this is just an adjustment layer that I've called Global Scale. And because these are all parented now, I can then just adjust the scale of that with one parameter. And you can see here as well, again, just linear keyframes going from 100 all the way up to 120% as this composition moves forward. And the reason why I've got them snapping on as I do and not just all happening at the start is, of course, timing. If you go back to our main comp, let's listen to that in situ. It's hitting on the beat. The final thing that we did here to create some depth, you'll see if I click on one of these, each one has a Gaussian blur on. The top one here, which is the one closest to us, which is pretty much out of the frame for a lot of it, has a 20% Gaussian blurriness value. Next one down is 10. Then the one that's in focus is, of course, 0. Then we go to 5, and then we go to 7. And then the final one, I think, is 10. So again, basically what we're creating there is our focal point in the middle. So this is the one that is in focus within this fake 3D, fake camera lens space. And then the ones further back are blurrier the further away from that focal point and blurrier further this way of the focal point as well. Just tricky little visual things like that that give the illusion of depth. Let's go through and take all of these blurs off and see what that looks like. So there we are. That's with all of the blurs off, and it's fine. It's just not as interesting as having all of those blurs on to create that illusion of depth. Okay, now this final scene is a fun one and it's pretty complex, so let me walk you through step by step. Also, again, as a note, if you are working alongside me in the project files, then you'll note that unless you already have this font I'm working with, which is called Ekati, then you'll need to swap it out with something else. This will give you a good excuse to then tweak the expressions that I'm about to show you though, so it's kind of a win-win. And if you do want the font, conveniently, you can find it on Envato along with thousands of other fonts and millions of other creative assets, perfect for motion designers and video creators. Assets like high quality stock footage and music, and this jazzy music track that we used in this animation is straight from Envato, as well as artist-created, studio-quality motion templates for programs like After Effects, designed to save you time and level up your video making with a click of a button. To learn more about Envato, check out the link in the description below. So the way we animate between these font weights is complex in some ways and actually really simple in others. It does take a moment or two to set it up, but once you do, you can then very easily go in and tweak your expressions for different fonts, so long as they have variable weights. So let's dive into exactly how I did it. First, I create the control layer. So in this case, clearly. And I want that formatted the way that I want the final animation to look. I then went and duplicated that control layer 7 times for the 7 letters in my word. You can then double click on each layer and type out each letter of the word. I'll then add a fill effect to my control layer and make it red or something really contrasty, and then I'm going to go in and manually reposition each of the individual letter layers to match the layout of my guide layer. Now you can either make this an actual guide layer or hide it at this point. We're done with it really, so you can also just delete it if you want to reduce your layer stack. Next, I'm going to create a new null and I'm going to call that slider control, and I'm going to go to the effects and presets panel and look for an effect of the same name, slider control, and I'll drag that onto this null layer. I'm then going to duplicate that slider control 7 times in my effects controls panel and rename each one to correspond with each letter. So C-L-E-A-R-L-Y. All right, so now we get to start writing some expressions. And on our C layer here, we're going to twirl it down to expose text and then source text. And then whilst holding Alt or Option on our keyboard, we'll click the stopwatch to open up our expressions window. In my original comp for this scene, you can see that I already have the expressions written out and they're super long and probably look really intimidating if you've never done this before. But don't worry, in my example, I kind of went a little bit overboard, a little bit ham, and put every single font weight in, but in practice, I only actually cycled through a few of those. So we'll recreate this with a limited amount of font weights. So effectively what this expression is going to do is it's going to tell After Effects what we want the slider control for each letter to do, and what we want it to do is move through each font weight as we slide it up, and then we can keyframe it. First up, we need to create a new array, which is effectively a place to store a list of variables, in this case, our different font weights. So I type var space array equals open square bracket. So that's variable array, open square bracket. And then I hit the return key and start adding my variables, my font weights. So between quotations, you type the font name dash weight name, and you get this from the character dropdown over here. It has to be exactly the same, and if there's spaces in the font name or the weighting name, it all has to be one word, so just close the gap. It's much easier, obviously, when you see me writing it out than me trying to explain it. Then you have to go through and write this line by line for each of your font weight variations. It's easiest to just copy and paste this, then change what needs to be changed. Before you copy and paste though, add a single comma after each line, or otherwise it doesn't work. You need a comma after each line in your variable stack. Once you've added all of your fonts, finish off the array with a closed square bracket and a semicolon. Now we need to connect it to our slider control and explain how we want that to work. We'll add the math.round function, which will make sure our slider control moves between whole numbers and not an endless list of decimal points. So type r equals math.round, and it will add in these brackets. Put your cursor between these two brackets, and then drag this expression pick whip up to the slider control in your effects controls panel that corresponds with the layer that you're working with, so in this case C. You'll now see that this adds in the rest of the expression that deals with using the slider control to control these values. To finish it off, we just need to direct it back to the style array that we created, so add in one more bracket, a semicolon, and then on a new line, type style.setFont array R, and it should be formatted like this. If all went well, you can click out of the expression window and start cycling through your fonts and weights. And if you do have a problem, just check those commas that I mentioned before. Usually it flags up with a little, you've done something wrong, and it will tell you what you've done wrong. The order in which you listed the fonts is reflected in the numbers on the slider. The first one in the list is 0.00 on the slider, the second one is 1.00, and so on. Just something to be aware of. So now you can slide through these variables and keyframe them over time, thus animating the font weights. One other thing to look out for though is that if you go past the number of fonts that you have listed in your variable array on the slider, then it will just jump to a random font that's next in your font list. So keep an eye on that. But also, that said, it could be a way to do some wackadoo animations. Have a play with that. You know, your mileage may vary, just something to think about. So let's copy that over to the rest of our layers now. With our C layer open, right click on the source text and select copy expressions only. Then open up the source text function on each of the layers and Control V into them to paste, or right click and click paste. We also need to go up into each layer's expression and just change where the expression is pointing, because we have a number of sliders and the original one was pointing to C. And all you need to do, because we renamed all of our slider controls, is change the letter down here. No need to play with any of the pick whips or anything like that. Really simple. Now you can go through and animate to your heart's content. The way I did it was to have the font weight animate almost kind of in a wave fashion as this like snake passed by it, but you can do whatever you like really. And now the only thing left to do is to show you how I put this all together. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing remarkable or really that special about how I put this together. It does pay to understand how I kind of compile all of these random scenes together. Now, of course, I was thinking about how to bring these scenes together as I was building them. Of course, we've already looked at moments like this ball bouncing and then this ball bouncing out of here into the next scene, and those moments crossing over here with some transparency. But let's just look at some other moments here. So on this first one here, where if I pull this out a little bit here, you can see where the crossover is. And obviously we don't want that to overlap in a transparency sense, but you can kind of get an idea of how the motion goes from the first scene to the next. Now, the reason why I cut it where I did, if you look at this where, it's pushing into here, and then as it comes to rest, our does starts to animate. So watching the where, crossing over with the does, and I'm kind of looking at the DO here, where does. And so you kind of want to keep that movement moving at the same pace. So that's why I have it cut the way I do. So you can see that that motion then flows into each other. So let's just play that in situ. So you can see what I mean there. The where and the D and O are kind of matching speeds and taking the movement from one scene to the next. Now, it doesn't really matter having a hard cut between these scenes because the start of this scene obviously has this ball coming up. So you kind of want to have some dead space here for this ball to live in. And the same here as well, because the O has dropped down and then given us this clear space for the next word to begin. That was the actual word that I'm talking about. So you don't always need something fancy to bridge the gap between two pieces of animation. You do just need to sort of think about what is happening next though. You don't want, for instance, like if this begin was say over here like this, it's not going to look as good because you're kind of got this one disappearing and then becomes the B. In my opinion, it's nicer to have that drop out into clear space and then have that word follow through. And then there's just some other moments like this one. We've just timed these to the beat. So honestly, all I'm doing here is I'll go down and I'll grab my waveform down here. You can kind of see the beats. I'll put my playhead over the beats where I want these to jump on. And then I'll just double click into the comp here, which will take the playhead to the same part of the comp in terms of the timing. And then you can just trim and retime your layers within the subcomp to fit the main comp here. And in terms of any effects that you can do at a top main comp level, I've just got a basic noise effect here happening across all of my layers, both the gradient snake, the background, and also on this where here. And I think it just ties everything together and makes everything feel like one coherent piece. Now, it's pretty easy to just drop a noise effect on here and then render the whole thing out. There are plenty of other effects that you can go with and plenty of other assets and things like that that you can use from Envato to give your final piece a nice coherent look that stands out in the crowd. That's the end of our kinetic typography animation and all of the techniques used and a bit of a look at how I set up a project to achieve something like this. And I really hope that helps in peeling back the curtain a little bit and showing what these types of projects look like. It's really good, I think, as a beginner to be able to dive into someone else's After Effects project and kind of pick it apart and see how they've made it. It's pretty invaluable. And that's also why it's really great to have an Envato subscription, because you can download all of these professionally created templates and rifle through them, working out exactly how other creators have put stuff together, reverse engineering those techniques for yourself, and generally growing your skills while you're at it. It's a really good way to learn. Thanks for being with us on this one. If this was helpful or you'd like to see more of these in-depth kind of intermediate tutorials on the channel where I pull apart a complete project and then let you know what I've done, let me know down in the comments and let me know where I should head next project-wise. And until then, I don't know, keep it moving, keep it kinetic.